Hello everyone, it's Debbie Evans here, and yes, this is Rolo. He's in rather sleepy mode, but I thought we would share with you today a chapter from The Secret Adventures of Rolo, Book 5, Phoenix and the Dragonling. And this is Chapter 5, Rolo and the Invention of the Telegraph. Mum, do you know when the internet was invented? The floppy-haired boy was attempting his homework but couldn't be bothered to look up the answer. The smiley lady emerged from the kitchen and gave him a mixing bowl and 2 beaters, and I could tell immediately that these had been recently used to make some rock cakes. He took them and started licking the cake mixture, and soon it was all round his mouth and on the end of his nose. I would see to that later. In fact, if they would both leave the room, I could do the washing up for them. They only need to ask. The internet? No, not really. We used to visit the local library and look in reference books when I was at school. If we couldn't find what we wanted, we would ask the librarian for help. Librarians were all-knowing and would be able to direct us to the correct bookshelf to find the answer for ourselves. We used to use reference books, encyclopedias. I bet you don't even know what they are. They were weighty books where listings were in alphabetical order, and you could only look at them in the library, not borrow them for home use, she mused. Couldn't you just take a photo of the page on your mobile phone? Goodness me, no. We didn't have mobile phones until almost after you were born. You had to take a notebook and paper and write things down. Your generation is so used to having access to information at the touch of a button, it wasn't always so easily accessed. But if mobile phones were first widely used in your lifetime, the internet was certainly invented during mine, she smiled. This probably reinforced the floppy-haired boy's theory that his mum was really ancient, as most children do think of their parents in that way. If you're interested in finding out more about the invention of the internet and telecommunication in general, I think we should have a weekend away in Cornwall, with Rolo, of course. She bent down and ruffled my ears. I was listening intently. I like a trip away with these two. Why Cornwall? Asked the floppy-haired boy. Isn't that a place for clotted cream, pasties and summer holidays on the coast? The smiley lady rolled her eyes. She must have learnt that from him, as she'd been on the receiving end of that expression many a time, I know. A friend of mine recommended the Telegraph Museum at Porthcurno, and I think it sounds really interesting. It's the exact spot where underwater cables landed, linking the UK with the rest of the world for telecommunication purposes. I'll research where we can stay with Rolo. I don't think we have anything planned this weekend. Later that evening, they reconvened in the kitchen. I've booked, said the smiley lady. We will stay in an apartment at the Old Success Inn at Sennan Cove. Rolo is welcome there, but he won't be allowed in the museum. We'll have to take it in turns to pop out and see him in the car. If we go this weekend, the weather won't be too hot for him, as it's just before the annual regulation comes into force banning dogs on the beach during the summer season. My ears pricked up at that. Beach? I love going to the seaside, playing chase with the other dogs, paddling, barking at the waves and fighting with seaweed. I don't mind sleeping in my cage in the car for a bit whilst they visit some museum. Is it far? Said the floppy-haired boy, closing his homework book and looking at his mobile phone. About 4 hours from here by car. We'll stop on the way down to stretch our legs. I nodded off at this point, dreaming of salty water, fish and chips, and chasing big waves. I went to the forest secretly that night to ask Athelstan about telecommunication, as I knew nothing about it. Why do you want to know? And how long have you got, little pup? It's a massive and fascinating subject. Where to begin? I shall tell you about the invention of the electric telegraph, which was vital for sending messages quickly. Prior to this, the fastest means of delivering a message was by horse and rider, which in America was known as the Pony Express. And despite the advent of the postal system in England in 1840 by William Hill with his penny black stamp, delivery of urgent messages still relied on physically handing over a written message. Postal delivery took even longer if you were trying to send a message overseas. I settled at the foot of the tree, all ears, in listening mode. Let's go back to the 19th century. Electricity was a recently discovered man-made force of energy, but no one had worked out how to use it in a practical way. An Italian, Alessandro Volta, made the first kind of battery, and then Danish physicist Hans Christian Ørsted realised the connection between magnetism and electricity. This was called electromagnetism, which would become vital to the invention of the telegraph. An Englishman called William Cooke was one of the many inventors trying to use this newly discovered phenomenon to create a means of communication, using switches, needles, wires, and electromagnetism, but the range was limited. He met Charles Wheatstone, who had already had some success with getting signals to travel over distance. Together, they invented a 5-needle telegraph system. Each needle could be directed to the left or right to point to a letter or number on a diamond-shaped grid using electromagnetism. This eliminated the need for learning the meaning of a code. The needle would point to a letter and spell out a word, which could be written down by a human operator at the other end. "I'm with you so far," I said to the wise tree dragon. Athelstan suggested that he send me on an adventure to find out for myself how efficient the early telecommunication system really was. I was ready to go at once. Yulia and Dar appeared as if by magic, Yulia's lantern illuminating the way into the time tunnel. She also had my pink ball, so the tunnel entrance opened to allow me access. "What time span are we entering?" I asked as I followed her inside the earthy passage. 1845, she answered. "Is that the year or the time?" I made a little joke. "The year, silly," and I heard her tinkling laughter fading as she disappeared into the darkness of the time tunnel. I caught up with her, following the bobbing lantern. She said, "So this is 8 years after Cooke and Wheatstone's early telegraph instrument had been assembled. It looked like a diamond-shaped box. The 5-needle electric telegraph was efficiently used by railway companies to send messages telling the whereabouts of trains. You have to remember that trains as a means of transport for ordinary people were quite new at this time. And this was 8 years before public post boxes were installed, so the telegraph didn't exactly kill the postal system, but ran in tandem with it," Dar added. I liked train journeys and thought fondly of my trip to Dartmouth. Yulia continued with her explanation. The developed telegraph system could transmit messages between copper wires held aloft by wooden poles, which ran along the side of train tracks, meaning that passengers could send a message to book a hansom cab, a horse-drawn taxi and driver, to meet them off an arriving train without having to wait at the station. This was a new idea. "What you're going to witness," Paddy paused, "is the capture of a murderer, all thanks to the speed of the newly invented telegraph. Athelstan is sending you to Salt Hill, near Slough," she finished triumphantly. This sounded both exciting and dangerous. Sure enough, I emerged in a dark, smoky Victorian road and looked around to get my bearings. I couldn't see much in the gloom of the gas lamp lighting in the streets, but my left ear pricked up when I tuned into the distressing sounds of a woman groaning as if in terrible pain. Without hesitating to assess the danger, I ran in the direction of a nearby cottage where the noise seemed to be coming from. I tried nudging the front door to see if I could assist in any way, but couldn't budge it, and there was no window open that I could see, so I did the next best thing, looked around for urgent help. And we're going to leave it there, but I will continue tomorrow. This is The Secret Adventures of Rolo, Book 5, Phoenix and the Dragonling. And so we will return, and I'm just going to finish with a shot of Rolo, who has actually nodded off during our reading. Thank you very much for listening. Bye.